I have never been so desperate to watch the next episode of a TV show. That might be a slight exaggeration. I'm sure there are other occasions when I have been so eager to find out what happens next, but I will wait a week. I am watching one episode of Back to You per week to make it last, and honestly, Hug and Tell was fantastic, unpredictable, a brilliant roller coaster. This is the 11th episode of the first and only season. This is directed by the wonderful James Burrows. And as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. I'll talk about the main narrative in bulk, but very briefly, we also have part of the narrative focusing on Gary, because the security guard gives everybody really happy greetings. He hugs them and says nice things to them. And he never really seems to do that with Gary, and Gary wants to know why. And Marsh and Ryan tell him that, well, he comes off as kind of cold and not very approachable. And Gary takes it to heart, but also listens. And he's had enough. And these are, of course, as I said, big spoilers. He approaches the security guard, and it turns out, and I didn't expect this, the security guard went to school with him. And Gary actually gave the security guard a negative review when he was in the school production of Grease. He plays Kaniki. And while there are a lot of Grease-based puns, he said that he was Grease-frightening, hopefully demoted, and he was Summer not loving him, which is awful. But Gary apologises and agrees to make it up to him by going to see his one-man play about a security guard in the gates of heaven. I'm not a huge fan of one-person shows, but I do like the sound of that as a narrative. That sounds really interesting. And then he gets this delightful hug, which was absolutely adorable, and it's probably one of my favourite Gary moments. So that was great. Then we have the main narrative, and this was just so wild, so unpredictable. It starts off with Kelly dropping Gracie off at school, and then Kelly and Chuck are discussing how to handle it. They decide to go see a therapist to make sure they're handling it the right way. And Chuck has this outburst where he's pouring out all of his feelings about how upset he is that he's missed 10 years of his daughter's life. And he says that Kelly took those away from him, those 10 years of his only daughter's life. And this is something I think I've mentioned before. Every parent deserves to know they have a child. Not every parent deserves to be a parent, because there are some not nice people in the world. But in general, most people deserve to know that they have a child and deserve to have the chance to be in that child's life. Certainly that's why courts typically demand kind of custody in one way or another, shared custody or visitation rights or whatever. So really, Chuck was in every right to be in his daughter's life. And the only reason he wasn't is because Kelly didn't even tell him Gracie existed. And honestly, I feel like that was the wrong decision. I feel like that was a very selfish decision, and no good could have come from that. And Chuck poured out all of these feelings, and it was very powerful. We then have a brief broadcast, and then Chuck and Kelly are in the office discussing things, and Kelly refers to Chuck's outpouring of his emotions as his little tantrum. This is all her fault. It wasn't a tantrum. He was just finally releasing all of his emotions. And honestly, Kelly comes across as a really unlikable person. On the one hand, I love her because it's Patricia Heaton and I'm going to love anything she does. But at the same time, Kelly is very unlikable in a lot of ways. Likeable in some, but certainly in this episode, not the best. And then she decides to toy with Chuck's feelings, and I wasn't sure if she was being genuine or not. My first thought was, this isn't genuine. And then I thought, hang on, she's playing with him. So I couldn't make up my mind, but we find out pretty quickly. She says, I still have feelings for you. And my first thought was, that's unexpected. Is she just messing with him? And then I thought, this is genuine, and then playing with him. And I just kept going back and forth as she was pouring out her emotions about how she felt about Chuck. And when Chuck said, we don't have to tell her, tell Gracie now, that's when I decided that she was just playing with Chuck's emotions to get what she wanted. Again, not very likeable in this episode. And then Chuck leaves the office and he tells Ryan that he'd fallen for some insincere flattery, and then he realised that the exact same thing had just happened to him. And Chuck decides to go to Kelly's house. And he tells her, once you said what you said to me, I realised I felt the same way. I love you. And they only keep this up for probably less than a minute. Kelly quickly admits what she was doing. And they decide to tell Gracie. And Kelly says, in 1 minute, all our lives are going to completely change. And that really heightened the drama for me. That from that point on, I kind of got butterflies in my stomach because I had no idea how this would unfold. I had no idea how Gracie would react. And Chuck fainted. He fainted on the sofa and he comes to, and then they decide to tell Gracie. And Kelly is, I think quite rightly, the one who said that he is your father. And immediately she fainted. And then it said to be continued. And I was so infuriated. Perfect ending because it left me desperate for the next one. But I can't. I will wait a week. I'm watching one a week because it's not the biggest show. It's not the longest running show. So I'm trying to make it last. But I am desperate. I thought at the end of the previous episode I was desperate for the next one. But this is just cranking it up a notch. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait to find out Gracie's reaction. I'm keen to see if they'll tell other people at the TV station or if they'll just keep it between them. I don't know. I have absolutely no idea. This episode probably didn't go the way I expected. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. But that's not a bad thing at all. And I'm really, really excited. Also, we end with a preview of the one-man play about the security guard at the gates of heaven, which was a nice way to end things, and I rather enjoyed this one. Absolutely. So far, Hug and Tell is one of the strongest episodes of Back to You. I cannot wait to watch the next one.